Hello, everyone. Thank you for our warm welcome. I'm here in Holland since yesterday with two of my friends from Techland, who are sitting over there. I managed to have an amazing evening yesterday, an amazing adventure. This is another one, so keep your fingers crossed that it will go well. I'm here to talk about designing a sequel, about designing and trying to give you some tips, some insights mostly, some methods that we have used while creating a sequel to Dying Light, a sequel called Dying Light 2 Stay Human. My name is Tymon Smektala. I'm a lead game designer and hopefully a good spirit at Techland. Recently, I got promoted. I didn't manage to update the slide yet. Currently, I am Dying Light franchise director. So it means that if you are unhappy with the state of Dying Light and moving forward, then you can put that blame on me, but I hope you will be happy. I am a member of the amazing Techland family for almost 10 years, more than 9 years. But actually, I'm working in the game industry for almost 20 years. I started as a video game journalist. I was writing about games for more than a decade. I joined Techland. I thought that I knew everything about games. Of course, the first month showed me that I didn't know nothing, because actually when you start making games, you start understanding them as they are. I have also did some other things in my life. I have PhD in economics. I have released 4 music albums. I used to be a rapper, so I can say yo the same way as Snoop Doggy Dogg. And I have published 3 books. Most of them were focused on public relations, but there's also one which was a lexicon of hip-hop music with bios and of artists and reviews of albums. It's a very nice book that I really like. Professionally, and this is important because everything that I will say comes from my experience, so you can also kind of look at what I'm saying to the lenses that I will show you right now. I have joined Techland in 2015 working as a producer for Dying Light. I'm saying producer because actually I didn't produce anything. The company wanted to have a spokesperson for the game, and they hired me because of my media experience to be talking about the game. But they thought that if I get a label producer, then media don't really understand what I'm doing. They will treat me as someone important, and they kind of did. But then I started getting into game design. I was happy and I was lucky enough to have amazing friends around me. Głowa, Korek, the guys that are sitting over there, as well as Binky, the guy that Maciej Binkowski, a great game designer who has taught me basically everything I know about video game design. Another great person, Adrian Ciszewski, our creative director. Those people included me in their family and they allowed me to grow as a game designer. So it was Dying Light. After we completed Dying Light, like my role on the first game grew with time. I was asked to become the lead game designer of Dying Light, the big expansion for the first game. But the thing is, I was also a lead game designer. Why lead? Because there was not that much of a team to actually lead, because it was mostly me and maybe 2-3 additional game designers who were mostly part-time. So I wasn't really able to show my leading skills. I got the chance to do it while we were working on Dying Light 2 Stay Human, where I was a lead game designer of a slightly bigger game design team. One question. Is the translation okay? Does it work? Because I was... No? Okay. But at least barely, or you want me to leave it, or should I deactivate it? Okay. I didn't know how this works. I thought it's like a cool feature, so let's test it. But if it doesn't work, then... Okay, it's better now. Okay. Okay, so the talk of the topic is how to design a AAA sequel, tips, insights, methods used during the creation, but mostly pre-production of Dying Light 2 Stay Human. I will explain why this part of the process was chosen by me. I decided that the presentation will kind of look like the Brody herring sandwich. So there is the herring, which is the most important thing of the presentation, which is the actual very focused insight on how we approach defining what the sequel should be. Because when you define the game, then basically most of what happens afterwards is based on those initial decisions. Those initial decisions have a tremendous impact on the whole project. Then there will be also some Comcomer, is that right? The gherkin, right? The cucumber, which will be, I will show you a neat trick which we used to communicate the idea for the game to the team internally. And actually, this is a very rare thing because this is a way for you to look into a very early prototype, not playable, but a prototype of Dying Light to Stay Human. And then there's also UI, is UI onion, right? Ayu? Okay, apologies. One funny thing that has happened for us during the production, actually this is extremely funny because, once again, how do you pronounce the word? Ayu. Okay, so you pronounce it Ayu, but you write it UI, right, which is UI. And the funny thing is about UI, so I thought it's like double joke, like joke on top of a joke. And this will be focused on game design, but on a very high level, because as I said, this is pre-production, this is defining of what the sequel should be. So, Dying Light to Stay Human, I will sometimes speed up because I don't want to be another person that will delay other people's presentations. So Dying Light to Stay Human, what it is, it's a AAA game which was released on all big platforms, PC, PS4, PS5, all of the Xboxes. Its first-person perspective is an open-world action RPG. I think open-world and action are the more important parts of the definition. It is a single-player with non-linear campaign, but it is story-driven. It allows you to make choices that impact the story, but also the world around you. But it can also be played in 4-player co-op. And actually, this is the most difficult combination for any developer, I believe, if you try to make a narrative game with choices, and then you also want to have 4 people playing at the same time, and like going crazy with the choices, going crazy with the tone of what's happening. They just basically start jumping, they start how do you call it, ducking, and then there's some serious stuff going in the narrative. It's very hard to combine that. How it first. Actually quite successful. Over the first weekend, we have sold 3 million copies. During that time, it was 25th most played game on Steam, with the mighty Skyrim being 24th, so it was like a tremendous achievement for us. In the first month, it sold 5 million copies. It's still selling very well. We will soon announce an even bigger number where we are currently. We started with a very simple, maybe not that simple, but with the observation, with the idea that we don't want to do a usual sequel. We didn't just want to take the previous game and just add some new content, like new missions, maybe new environment for you to play with, and maybe tweak and update some of the mechanics. Of course, that would be easier, but being Poles, we are usually crazy. We are maybe even over-ambitious, but we wanted to do way more than just usual stuff. So we have looked at what our starting point is, and it's the first game, which was released in 2015. It has reached more than around 30 million players in its lifetime. But even when we were starting, and even when we were starting working on Dying Light 2, it still drew more than 500,000 players playing the game monthly. So it was a tremendous success, and for many people, it was a game that was defining the zombie genre. Actually, it was the fastest fastest selling new IP on the previous generation of consoles. So when we started working, we had to look at some caveats, some considerations, some things that have limited us. And we started working in the second quarter of 2016, understanding that this will be a long production. We had to change the technology. We have used our in-house engine called Chrome engine. We decided that we need to check it because its roots began with our first 3D releases. So it was about 15 years old as a technology when we started the point of working on Dying Light to Stay Human. So we knew that we had to change it. We invested a lot in our new technology called C Engine. As you can see, we're not very inventive with engine names. But actually, the engine is quite nice and is getting even better and even better. What was important about the engine was that it was an engine built by us for us. So it was a great advantage because we knew what kind of games we wanted to make. We knew that we wanted to make open-world games, first-person games with high-fidelity graphics. The idea was that you are getting very immersed in the world around you because of the technology, because of the graphics. So we could build the whole engine around it. We also had to consider some of our ambitions. As I said, as Poles, we are totally crazy, and our boss, our CEO, is even crazier, and his ambitions are as high as Mount Everest. But we knew that we can afford this because we had financial stability because of the success of the first game. And we also knew that it's worth focusing on Dying Light 2 and worth making it the best game possible for us because it's our own IP. So this is basically our royal crown jewels. We benefit from everything that happens with the IP, so we knew that we need to focus on it and make it the best we can. It's not a game that we are making for a publisher, it's a game that we are making for us. Yeah, so this is the process of making the game, and you start with just looking at this great wilderness in front of you with a map, and that map is ideation and pre-production. And as I said, this is the part where we spent quite a lot of time to make sure that we make the correct initial decisions, because we knew that whatever decision we'll make at this point will impact the whole production. So how we approach that? Of course, we have done the game, we have done the first game, but as you probably know, as game developers, if you work on something for a prolonged period of time, at some point you basically start seeing it for what it is. You might know that you understand your game, but then you see players interacting with your game, then you see players' feedback, and you understand that they actually see something different than you do. So we started with basically resetting all of our assumptions, resetting what we knew, and we started looking at trying to rebuild our knowledge about the game by looking at a lot of information that was around us. We were lucky because we had the first game, so there was a lot of feedback, a lot of data coming from the game that we could analyze. So we actually started doing this. So we started analyzing Steam reviews, Reddit posts, Twitter mentions, comments under YouTube, reviews of the game that was released, game forums. We were starting watching YouTubers and streamers. We spent basically hundreds of hours looking at people playing our game on YouTube. We have analyzed achievement and trophies completion rates. And of course, the most important thing, as always, data gathered in-game. Actually, we didn't gather that many data when the first game was released, but because it was supported for a very long time, for almost 5 years, we started adding the elements that allowed the solutions that allowed us to gather data from the first game. So we had a lot of that stuff. And of course, we were looking at different things. Again, almost at everything. So when it comes to social media, we were looking at what people are liking, what they're disliking, but getting really granular. Do they like this character? Do they like this type of activity? Do they like the game tone of this quest or that quest? Do they like the look of this one particular weapon? We were looking at completion rates, trying to understand what type of content from our game excites people most, what people interacted with, and again, going very, very granular, even with the outfits. We were looking which of the outfits were changeable player appearances were the most popular, and we tried to understand why. We were looking at things like which type of weapon is the most used in the game. So we found out that for Dying Light, it's the machete. For some reason, actually, we know what the reason is, because it's really meaty to cut off a zombie head, but the machete, from all of the slashing weapons, machetes were most used by all of our players. So we understood that machetes are quite iconic for the game. And when we started working on weapons for the second games, of course, if you look at the percentage of different weapon types, most of them, the majority of them is the machetes. Machetes are the most numerous. And of course, rituals like session length, session frequency, how often people log into the game, do they have any habits, do their habits change with, I don't know, with holidays, with Christmas time, etc., etc. It's a lot of data. It's very difficult to get a hold of it. So it's very important for you to develop your own way of storing that data, analyzing that data, and maybe building a team around it. The bigger your game is, the more important for you is to have a team that actually analyzes the game for you. And currently we have a team of data analysts, game analysts, that allow us to look very deeply into what's happening with our games. When we were doing this, we quickly understood that there are some things that people cherish, and we shouldn't probably touch them at all. So it's immersive, in-your-face gameplay, both in parkour and combat, effective and impressive traversal mechanic, parkour, very visceral. The viscerality and the creativity of our fights were also something that a lot of people, everyone basically prized. And the overall concept of day and night, something that changes the gameplay. As you can see in the brackets, there are things like parkour, combat, day and night combat. Parkour, combat, day and night. Those three elements, parkour, flowing, natural parkour as a traversal method, first-person melee combat, and day and night cycle were the three gameplay pillars on which we have built Dying Light 1. We have also realized a lot of things that we could improve on. So even with the core gameplay pillars, there was things that people weren't that excited about. So one of them was that we had basically one fix-it-all parkour move. If you played Dying Light, you know that most of the actions were done just by pressing the same button over and over again. The traversal in the game, the parkour in the game didn't evolve as much as it could in players' perception. Our combat, even though it was visceral and quite creative, very often was boiled down to just crunching numbers and hack and slashing and seeing who has a sword, a machete with a bigger damage. There was a lack of variety in encounters. There was a very loose connection between combat and parkour. What I mean by that is that players were using parkour to traverse the environment. They were meeting an encounter with enemies. They were stopping and just like smashing left, right, and then they were running again. So there was almost no connection between those two elements. I think that one of the most surprising things that we have found, and actually made not the best calls on this one, is that a lot of people were skipping the night part. Why? Because they thought it's too difficult, it's too scary. They don't want that kind of tension. So based on that, we made some decisions regarding the night in the second game. And actually, maybe we went too far with them, but I will explain this in a moment. One of the biggest things was that people were mentioning was lack of player agency in the story. And I think this is one of the core elements, the biggest element that the sequel tries to address. And one thing that, one thing that I made a goofy animation for was that we thought that people didn't like the goofiness of our game, of the first game, because there were a lot of things, a lot of elements that you could call goofy. The goofy elements were, for example, that there's a biter that walks to grab you and then suddenly slips because there's a hole in front of him and falls down from the roof. And we thought, okay, this makes the game goofy. This removes from the survival tone of the game. And we actually had a process which we called degoofication, which meant that we were looking at all of the elements of our game, trying to goofy them. And again, this is one of that's why it's in orange, because this is actually one place where we made some mistakes, because the second game is way more serious. It doesn't have those goofy elements, and now people are missing them. So actually, what we are having right now is having a process called goofication, and we're adding some of the goofy stuff back to the game. But again, get really analytical, if possible. Create a team of people that is focused only on analyzing and understanding data and supporting the developers with any type of data they need, because this will allow you to make good decisions regarding the sequel. You have a lot of data. You probably know what is there to fix, but then the question is how you want to fix it. And one of the approaches to finding a way to fix it, is to understanding who are you fixing this for, because this tells you which of thousands of methods you can use to fix a specific feature you want to choose. You need to choose to cater to your audience. We tried to analyze, when we started analyzing our audience, we were using first the the most classic taxonomy of players from game design, created by Bartels, the one which divides people into killers, achievers, socializers, and explorers. We tried to evolve that. We tried to create our own tags, names for the types of our players, but then we realized that actually it's just different names for the same taxonomy, so we just stuck to this. It depends on the game, but actually for our game, which is in a way quite classical, it's an open world action RPG, it's like this is the type of games. This is the type of game that is the most popular right now. So this taxonomy works if you work on a game which is completely different from a completely different genre. I encourage you to try to define your own types of players. Definitely do that. You need to understand what are the different groups of players that playing your game. Maybe you will use different groups, maybe you will define them differently, but also please try to think if it's just a new name on one of those four, or maybe it's actually different and it's valuable for you. So we have realized that from our players, we have mostly explorers and achievers. We knew what are their motivations are. We knew what their motivations are. We knew what those types of players want from the game. So they want like something they can complete and progress within, and they also want to use more complex strategy and tactics. For the explorers, which we had the most of, przede wszystkim, I wanted to say it in Polish, first and foremost, they wanted discovery and immersion and independence in their actions and what they're doing. So we applied those lenses to choosing the methods to fixing the problems we have defined in the first step. And this is the most important thing. Actually, there's only one slide for this, I think, but this is the most important thing. If you work on a sequel, if you try to improve a sequel, you need to stay totally focused. You need to stay laser focused, because it's very easy to change the very complex mechanism that made the first game work for you. So you have to be very precise about choosing the areas you want to improve. You need to define very accurate goals that you want to achieve within those areas. Then if you design those improvements, design them exactly being focused on your players and their needs, not anyone else. You have your players, focus on them. And of course, another thing that maybe we weren't the best at, keep the elements that you feel are important, that people cherish, intact. Don't even dare to change anything about parkour if parkour works in your game. Don't even dare to change anything about people management if people management works in your game. Don't even dare to change anything about car collisions if you work on a car game, if car collisions are seen by your community, by your players as something that's they get excited about and they accept it fully. Because then it's very easy to alienate your audience, because there's a sequel and a new IP. This is what I'm going to say is blasphemous, but Bruce Lee, the legend, the master, said, be like water. So when it comes to changing or making changes, making transformation between first game and the second one, I don't want you to be like Bruce Lee. Actually, I want you to be like a laser Bruce Lee, because I want you to be like laser and just focus on the things that are the most important. Okay, so how we approach this, looking at the three pillars that we had. As I said, one of the pillars was parkour, and we had the fixable parkour moves defined in the first step, and traversal gameplay doesn't evolve, defined in the first step. So then we defined the goals that we wanted to have. And the goals are, we wanted to have deeper and more challenging parkour mechanics. We wanted to improve the number of controller interactions the player had, not just pressing the one button. And basically, the overall goal was to create a real, very immersive parkour game. So we have applied a number of solutions. First of all, we have increased, we have doubled, but in terms of animations, but we have generally increased the number of parkour moves, and most of them, well, not most of them, but we were way more liberal with applying new control methods to those moves. And then we also use a skill tree to make sure that those additional moves, new moves with new control methods are introduced gradually over the course of the game. And of course, we have also used the classical rational game design methodology of making sure that each subsequent move is a little bit more complex for players to perform. We have also looked at our environments, and we have made sure that the environments also evolve with the game, asking players, encouraging players to use those different new moves that they have learned over the way. We have introduced a new gameplay mechanic called Parkour Puzzle, where players were able to climb high buildings, but they had to manage the resources of their stamina. So this added this little bit of realism to parkour. So generally, the game was still easy to traverse, and this was very important for us, that anyone could basically go from point A to point B without much effort. But if you really want to do it in the most effective way, then you have to use all of the skills, and then you have to be like the best parkour guy in town. And when we knew that we had a good parkour, then what we did is we infused even more parkour into our missions. Actually, this is something that we didn't do in the first game. In the first game, the missions were point A and point B. Traversal parkour was happening between point A and point B. Very rarely, the mission actually used parkour. So we made sure that there are more missions that actually ask players to reach a destination within a given time, chase an AI, etc., etc. And of course, we did a lot of tech improvements trying to achieve the immersiveness. So for example, we have introduced the self-shadow, which we didn't have in the first game. For combat, again, the hack and slash feel, lack variety of combat encounters, and loose connection between combat and parkour. Those were the issues we have identified. For those, we have defined a few goals. We want to have a tactical combat experience, so we wanted to have player constantly thinking what he should do within the next second and how this will impact the next 5 seconds of the combat. We wanted to make sure that there are player skill-based victories, so it wasn't that important how big of a machete you have. It was important how well you use it. We wanted to have a game where optimal strategy changes with each encounter. So then when we were designing our enemies, this was one of the basically rows to tick that they actually do that, and we tested this with different player skill setups. And we introduced active weapon modifications, active because they also rewarded player skill and player timing and player using them in the correctly tactical moment. And of course, introduction of new enemy types. And by that, I mean like big types written in bold, because in the first game, we had mostly zombies and just one type of human. In the second game, we have way more humans and way more zombies, so basically the number of enemies doubled or maybe even tripled. For day and night cycle, this was the part that we felt we did the worst job possible in the first game, because, and we had, well, maybe not like that, but we had a lot to improve. So first and foremost, we wanted to solve the issue of nighttime being mostly optional, and that player had single solution to the night part, which was if shit gets scary, I just run to the safe zone. So with the solutions we have applied is that we have, and this was, I think, the biggest decision that we have made regarding this, was that we have embedded the day and night cycle into even more into the world building and into the construction of our world. So we have come up with this idea that the day is for humans and the night is for the infected. So during the day, the infected hide inside buildings and other dark places, so you cannot go there. But you want to go there because the best stuff, the best weapons, the best loot is actually there. So what happens is you wait for the night and then use the night as your opportunity to reach those buildings. But what happens is that the infected leave the buildings, so now the streets are full of them, and you really have to use all of your parkour and combat skills to be able to reach those buildings. And to solve the issue of the guy running to the safe zone, we have also introduced a lot of new gameplay mechanics, like a UV flashlight that you could carry with you and you could use to repel enemies, to make sure that players has way more tools to play with the night systems. We don't have that much time, so I will speed it up a little. There was one issue that we have defined that was called the lack of player agency, that wasn't mentioned up to this point. So now let's move to the next point. And the next point is, if you add something new, make sure that it matters. Make sure that it's really impactful. Make sure that it addresses the biggest issue the player have with your game. And we defined this biggest issue as lack of player agency. In the story, there were signs where people were saying, Kyle's stupid. Why did he do this? Kyle was our main character in the first game, so if someone writes that your main character is stupid, then you know something is off. So we wanted to, and there was a moment, and it was in a lot of reviews. There was a moment in the game where the main character reaches a case, a chest full of antizin, which is a cure for infection, zombie infection, to simplify it. and he can drag it to a place and save some people, but then he listens on the radio. He has like a handler, someone who sent him on this mission, and that person says, you need to destroy this stuff. And on the cutscene, the main character was grabbing that chest full of life-giving cure and throwing this into water. So, fire. So destroying it. So this was the moment which, for a lot of players, was like very. It was disconnecting them from the experience. This was the moment which got them a lot of, gave them a lot of anger, and which gave us a lot of angry reviews on Steam. So we wanted to fix the issue of players not having player agency. Our creative director, again, a very crazy, ambitious guy, said, you know what, guys? We need to have a narrative which has the same amount of freedom that we have in our open world. Okay, then we started thinking, okay, but open world is emergent gameplay, a lot of systems. How we want to have it in the narrative? So he said, you know what, guys? The solution is narrative sandbox. Okay, but what is narrative sandbox? Well, you have to find out. So that was actually a very the difficult task. And it took us some time to define it. We started with a very simple approach, basically creating a branching narrative, which is crazy. It's actually a part of it. I don't even think it's a part of our narrative at some point. But then we realized it's unmanageable. We will not be able to do this. And actually, this is not the strongest element. So I don't know, there's a Polish saying, don't piss into the wind. Like, you don't want to get wet by pissing in the wind. You don't want to fight against something. You don't want to fight against the stream, let's say. So you need to use the strengths of your technology and of the design. So we decided that to make the new element matter, we need to step outside of the narrative and the classical thinking and do something that touches on our game more than just narrative. And we came up with this idea of city alignment system, which is a system where you make choices, you change the world around you, but when you change the world around you, there are different gameplay elements that are introduced to the world. So what it does, it allows you to shape the gameplay space around you so you can have even more fun with gameplay, and that's something that basically players want. Of course, there is still the narrative, but it's way more simpler than I presented on the previous slide. At one point, we even had basically we had the big graph with gameplay systems that players could introduce with their choices. But then we also again went to the laser Bruce route. We chose the best ones, and we have kept them in game. Oh, we don't have that much. Oh, okay, so we're running out of time. Okay, so I'll try to be even more speedier. One thing you can do is you can try, if you define the issues, if you define the solutions that are aimed directly at your players, and even if you address the biggest gripe that people have with your game with something new, then still you might feel this is not enough. We need to do something, we need to have something that will excite players even more, that will get them interested in the game even more. So what you can do is you can use a new angle, a new spin on the formula. And our spin was modern Dark Ages. So this was a thematic that we have used to look at every decision that we were making, from narrative to gameplay design, through different lenses, trying to see if we can make Dying Light, but different because of this. So what is modern Dark Ages? Is this concept that in our game, which happens 15 years after the apocalypse, actually 20, the civilization has gone to waste. So people has also kind of went back to medieval times. So it's medieval laws, like if you steal something, you get your hand cut off. But then it all happens in a very modern scenography, of course destroyed and devastated, but it's still modern buildings, modern skyscrapers. We thought that this crash of medieval thinking and medieval technology crossed with the leftovers of our previous civilization would be very, very interesting, something that would give that new angle to our game. And this actually touched our narrative design, world design, enemy design, basically every possible system. So to give you an example, we have took some modern buildings like the mall over there, but we have added wooden constructions, and now it looks like a medieval fortress. With the biters, we were looking at medieval illnesses like Black Death to make sure that, because we wanted those zombies to look, those infected to look like they have Black Death. For weapons, it was actually very easy because medieval weapons and our melee weapons, machetes, are very brutal and visceral. But then, if you look at our weapons closely, you see that those are medieval weapons, but made with modern materials. For character silhouettes, as you can see here as well, we also used the medieval references. So it was something that actually gave the team a lot of excitement about what they can do with the game and how they can feel that they're creating something new, something fresh. That angle really helped us. Because we have only 5 minutes left, and what I have at the end is 5 minutes of, as I said, very early prototype of the game. So I will just go to this. So we had a problem with explaining the ideas for the sequel to the team, because we had a lot of Bibles, design Bibles, a different one for world, a different one for art, a lot of design documents, a lot of presentations, what we want to achieve. But then, as usually, not everyone read to them, not everyone understood the words in the same way. We realized that we want to do something quite new and quite ambitious, but we're not on the same page with the team. So what we did, we created something which we called Player Experience Movie. We did this in 2016. We took a small team of about 8 people. We used assets from the first game, and by using some video editing and by using some programming hacks, we didn't really code that much, but we changed some elements of the game. We used, as I said, video editing, we used level design support, and we created a prototype of the second game using the first one, using the assets from the first one. And this was, what you will see right now is like a cut about 4 minutes out of 30 minutes that we had. But I think what you will see here is, it's 2016, it's 6 years before. I think what you will see is basically what the game became in the end. So I hope you'll enjoy it. I will just stand. Can we dim the light a little bit?
You read me? Got word from the PKs. Looks like they need our help again. They're looking for one of their snipers. Say he shot his commander in the back, made a run for it.
Nice.
Also, some PK conscripts got themselves lost near city center. So either we go after this deserter, or round up conscript sheep.
Let's find this sniper of theirs.
All right. PKs think he's holed up somewhere in Zone B. Marked where he was last seen on your map. Maybe a local will know more.
So as you can see, very early we have introduced the element of discovery in the world. Because we analyzed that this is something that the players, the explorers want. As you can see, this very simple mock-up cinematic was used to present the ideas for parkour combat, how it could look. One of the new elements of Dying Light 2 is the dark zones, the places where you go, which are dark, full of the infected. During the day, they are basically crowded with them. The narrative of the prototype kind of forces you to go inside a place which is dark during the day. You don't want to, but then you basically must to do it. One element that we have introduced was an infection mechanic, and this is our cheap way of communicating this as well. So this is an explanation of parkour puzzles.
You? You're looking bad, man. Had to use some of your antigen to get you kicking again. Kept some for myself. Finder's fee, you know.
And we even managed to include some of the modern dark ages into the build by reusing a building from the first game. So this was very, very successful for us, and I think after this, majority of the team was able to finally grasp what the game is going to be about. We are out of time, so I will just skip to, unfortunately I will skip the onion and the cucumber, but I will be around, so if you want to ask me more, then please do. One thing I want to say is that no matter what happens, is like I want you to be humble, because no matter how well prepared you are for the adventure that lies in front of you when you start making a new game, even if you get so well prepared as we did, there will be things that will surprise you. With that being said, I wish you a lot of luck on your adventures with making your own games. Thank you for the invitation. If you want to reach me, then here's my contact details. Thank you so much.